This is every TARDIS in Dalek Mod 1.16, and I'm going to show you every single one of them in detail, ranked from my least favourite to my absolute most favourite. So hello Fez wearers, Dalek Mod is literally every TARDIS interior from Doctor Who, as well as many custom ones made just for this mod, and they all have a whole bunch of cool features with a wide variety of different designs. Starting with number 23, we have the crystalline interior is a recreation of the 13th Doctor's interior. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the 13th Doctor's interior, so this is basically automatically my least favourite interior in the mod, but it's not all that bad to be fair. A big criticism I have of the actual interior is that it's just a console in the middle of a random room that's basically just a void, but this version fixes that, as these filled rusted steel beams roundels circle around the whole edge of the interior, making it an actual room, not just space. The ceiling still has that sort of void look to it, but it kind of works when it's just a ceiling. Another issue I have with the 13th Doctor's interior are those crab arms. I don't necessarily dislike them, and to be fair, when they had panels and an actual function in Series 13, it was alright, but I also liked it in Series 11 where the tops didn't moved with the rotor. But overall, I just wasn't really a big fan. I felt a bit clunky and unused. But all that aside, the crab arms here don't really look that good in my opinion, just because of the blocky nature of Minecraft. It doesn't really curve as it should, and they just look really odd, especially the ones at diagonals. Although the block they're made out of, this crystalline, has a really satisfying placing and destroying sound. It reminds me of the amethyst blocks. The interior has multiple hallways going in different directions, which makes it feel a lot bigger than it otherwise would. The designs aren't anything special, they just continue the same theme as the main room, but these are custom editions, so it's not too bad. But with that said, the colour scheme in this room is a bit odd to me. It's a mix of black and orange and yellow and brown and also random blues. It just feels like a big mess of not only a bunch of colours, but also a bunch of quite messy textures, and all of that in one quite dense space just makes it a big soup of madness. And although I do like a few things about it, like this quite cool floor design, as well as the custom blocks made just for this interior, but I was already not a big fan of it just because of my dislike of the actual one, and then add the limitations of Minecraft and whatnot onto that, it just ends up being my least favourite interior in the mod. I mean, there's not much you can do about it, and it's kind of crazy when you think about what I've put in spot 22. Yeah, this is an actual TARDIS. There's nothing special about this interior. In fact, it's incredibly boring. But basically, this just exists for someone to build their own interior on top of it, as a template is in the name, because it just gives you a clean sheet in the TARDIS dimension, where you can either in survival or creative make your own TARDIS interior. There's just a simplistic stone floor and stone console with a few hallway doors dotted around. And in case you're wondering, if you fall into this void, it won't kill you like the actual void. It will just teleport you back up to the start and give you a weird achievement. Anyway, there's not really anything else to mention here. And I know it's a bit weird to have this interior not last, but technically I could put this in first place because literally everything is built upon this. So the best interior in the world is technically this as well. And it's definitely not an excuse to put the 13th Doctor's TARDIS in last place, because I would never do that and that would ruin my credibility, and that's just not something I'd ever do, ever. Okay, so quickly moving on. This one is very different to the previous two. Ow, my ears. Oh my god. This one is very different to the previous two. It's the first custom one, and this is where my list started becoming hard to order, because I actually really like this one even though I've put it in 21st place. It's very big, but not too big to be empty and boring. It has an actual rotor, which goes from the top of the ceiling all the way down to the bottom underneath. Quite a large console, probably with the most controls out of any. A bunch of decorations, a really unique block palette, and just a whole bunch more. It's called the Epsimo TARDIS, at least I think that's how you pronounce it. And I will say, I'm not a massive fan of the colour scheme, mainly the pink and purple colours. It just feels a bit odd in conjunction with the black and greyness. I think maybe a blue or a red accent colour would have fitted better than the purple. It sort of resembles the Toyo's interior mixed with the coral ones, but obviously it has a load of custom stuff in it as well. In fact, it's a bit similar to the Brundube TARDIS from Gmod. The console's in this little dipped in area, as well as a few little other things like these side panels and scanners, and then there's a ring pathway going all the way around it, which also has these stairs which lead under the console. I actually really like this scorched smooth quartz block, as well as all its variants, like these roundels, this strip thing, these other roundels, because there's actually nothing bad I can say about this interior except for like the pinky purple stuff. I'm just not a big fan of it, to be honest, and that's sort of the only thing bringing it this low on the list. Some of those side panels I mentioned earlier are a bit weird. This one just has these daylight sensors, or daylight detectors, what the hell. Another one just has a random flower on it. This one just has some redstone nothingness on it, and then yet another flower. And this is just a weird mix of random nothingness. And then down here, as I said, you can go under the console. It has the bottom of the rotor with these weird TARDIS-y blocks, and a lot of interiors have these, so I'll just call them the maintenance blocks, I guess. And if you go over here, it leads you to a hallway system that is mainly made from the quartz I mentioned earlier, and also has a different roundel type, and then the return of the pink, my favorite block, or should I say magenta. But yeah, overall, I actually really like this interior. It reminds me of a bunch of other interiors while also being so different than all of them, and it's just the color scheme that I'm not a fan of. Although to be fair, I do like the crimson control panels it has, as well as having a Kablam computer by default, which is quite cool. And the number 20 is another custom one, but this one's a lot different. But on a quick side note, since my last video release, this channel hit 3,000 subscribers. And I just wanted to say a quick thank you. And even though only 8% of people who actually watched that video subscribed, we're on track to get over 4,000 this year, which is mental. Over the summer, I'm going to be making so many videos on different games and stuff all around Doctor Who mods. So if you don't want to miss anything, make sure you're subscribed because it's going to go crazy. This one is probably the most random interior in the entire mod. It's called the TARDIS interior for obvious reasons. There's so much stuff I love about this interior. The general idea is that this is inside of some sort of beehive or bee nest or whatever, and it's filled with the associated colours and blocks and all that stuff to create a really vibrant, fun looking interior. And whoever's idea it was to make an interior based solely around the worst Minecraft update 1.15 is probably insane, but you know what, it damn worked somehow, and it's probably the best thing to come out of that update if I'm honest. A surprising amount of this is just vanilla blocks, like a bunch of oak and carpet and honey and I think you get the point. But then again, there's also a whole bunch of Dalek Mod stuff obviously, like the scanners and rotor stuff, as well as the maintenance blocks sneakily hiding in here. There's also probably has the weirdest console in the entire game. It's made out of 4 oak slabs, it's got oak fences on the corners for some reason, just nothing on this block, a yellow rotor which you don't really see very often, not to mention these random signs all around the side. And over here there's a sort of side panel stroke computer desk stroke scientific area, I guess, which is very random but somehow actually fits in with the theme very well. And there's nothing like this in any other interior. I don't even know why it's here, but you know what, I'll take it. This is the hallway, and it's one of the most interesting ones because somehow literally all of it is completely vanilla except for these light boxes dotted around the place. And I'm actually a big fan of this design. In fact, it's probably one of my favorites. But that vanilla look, not only in here but in the main interior as well, only works well because the Dalek mod blocks are designed to be quite vanilla-esque, which is part of the reason why I like this mod so much. In spot 19, I've got the Rebellious 16th Doctor's interior. I'm not really sure what the name's meant to mean, but there are a few Rebellious Doctor interiors, so maybe it's just like a custom name for a custom interior. I don't really know what it's on about. I think there's 3 of them. They're all custom made, and they're all quite different from each other. This one is very big with a lot of empty space. I love the color scheme of it all. It's mainly brown, but then again, it still has dark browns and light browns, different textures and different things like that. And it isn't even all brown. Like down here, it's mainly grey, and then there's whatever color that's meant to be. White terracotta. Why is terracotta colors always wrong? This is not white anyway. A feature I do really like is this ceiling design. It makes the interior feel a lot taller, especially if you look at it from down here. Although I do think maybe it's a bit too tall, and maybe it'd be improved without this white terracotta section. The ceiling itself is meant to be like a scanner sort of thing, much like in the 8th Doctor's interior, and it has layers of black glass with end rods and different block types in it to show stars and planets in space. And it is a really, really good effect. So that's definitely like my favorite feature from any TARDIS so far. But to be honest, every interior from now on just has a cool thing like that in it. You enter this place right on the bottom level, and then you have to go up this ramp to get to the console, which is on its own sort of middle platform between the ground level and upper floor. The console follows the brown color theme and even has dark oak controls, but also has quite a lot of red on it, which I guess can't be helped with these sort of controls, but they lean into it with a red rotor. There's also this trapdoor here, which you climb down to go under the console, where there's a whole bunch of those maintenance blocks I was talking about, but also random things like an empty chest and a blast furnace for some reason. And down here there's also a few random chairs, an empty plant pot, and literal barrier blocks. However, there's one thing about this interior which really grinds my gears, and that's the fact that these fence posts, which, might I add, are meant to be structural pillars, literally none of them reach the floor. I know it's Minecraft and physics is literally meaningless, but I mean, come on. It's a pillar, at least commit to the pillaring. Am I being done? Does no one else care? No one else cares. Okay, I'll move on. And there's this upper floor, which has more meaningless stuff, especially chairs. I don't know what deal is with chairs today. There's just lots of chairs, as well as whatever this thing is in the middle of the path. But no, this interior is actually really cool, and it's very unique, but it is the weakest one among all the Rebellious Doctor ones, which actually reminds me of the next TARDIS.
I'm the Doctor, coming to
At 18th place is another custom Rebellious Doctor interior, and it's the last custom TARDIS in general for quite a while in the list. And it's got a very simple layout, which is probably a big reason why I like it so much. It has this orange and black colour scheme in a normal sized, single floored control room, with this pretty cool hallway design as well. Around the walls here, there's a bunch of decorative items. There's things like extra control panels, bookshelves, a literal car, I think, 3 sea pickles, if you're into that, and whatever the hell this thing is meant to be. There's also 2 windows. Behind one of them is a TARDIS hologram, not an actual TARDIS, and behind the other is a Weeping Angel statue, but it's a statue of a Weeping Angel, not an actual Weeping Angel. This is likely a reference to that scene in Time with the Doctor where the Weeping Angel is stuck in its own reflection, or I'm just inventing ways to mention 11th Doctor some more, I'm not sure. The floor's made up of orange wool and orange concrete powder, which creates a really cool pattern which isn't too in your face, but is noticeable enough to catch your attention. Although the ceiling could have a bit more variation, it's just coal that protrudes a little bit to meet the rotor. On speaking of the rotor, contrary to what I would have thought, is actually yellow tube rotor, not orange. And then the console's a bit odd because it has these steel slabs in the middle of each side for some reason, so there's only actually 4 controls on the console. Although to be fair, there are 2 side panels here which feature more controls and the maintenance blocks. At the back here, there's a big entrance to the hallway, and it's got a really cool sci-fi design, which is a bit of a weird contrast to the main interior, but this looks a lot more like a spaceship than the actual interior does. It does feature some orange behind these trapdoors and things, so it's not too distant from it. And there's also these 2 little side corridors near the entrance, which have the same design, just a bit smaller. So yeah, overall, it's actually quite a cool interior. There's not really too much to go over, which I guess is part of its charm. And I'm actually a surprisingly big fan of the random stuff around the edges. They do have some functionality, whilst also adding a bit of like personality to the interior. This TARDIS is quite different from most, as it's literally just a console in a random room. That's because this is the refit TARDIS from the 3rd Doctor era when he was exiled on Earth, and during that time, he had his TARDIS console in a random garage, ex-lab, ex-warehouse type room. But either way, I've put it in 17th place, mainly because of just how out there it is. It has the Pertwee console in a pretty weird control room, and quite a basic hallway design. If the room is meant to be like that room from the 3rd Doctor era, then it isn't exactly very accurate to it. It just seems to be loosely based on it. It has some bookshelves, as well as using the back of a loom to make it look like an empty bookshelf, which is quite smart to be fair. Random barrels and vaguely scientific equipment just dotted around. Everything other than the console itself is completely made up and custom made for this mod. But with that said, it's not a bad thing. In fact, I quite like the design it has. It looks weirdly medieval, which creates an odd contrast between the extremely scientific like TARDIS console. Although I can't say I'm a big fan of the spruce logs, especially in the hallway. This feels like something built in like 2013. I think it's just a bit too big. I don't know what it is. It just feels off. Also because the lights up here are off center, which I've just noticed. But yeah, this interior is pretty hit or miss. You either like it or you don't. And to me, I'm quite a big fan of it, but I can see how you wouldn't be. This is, at least, heavily inspired by the Toyota TARDIS, used by both the 11th and 12th Doctors, but it's also different enough where it can't really be called a recreation, because quite a lot of stuff has been changed here. And there's also an interior later on in the video, which is a direct recreation of that TARDIS, which is just another reason why I'm classing this one as its own little thing. Some things that are similar to that one are the console and entrance being on this sort of upper level, and then there being a level below that as well. And even like the shape of the room and things are quite similar. You can see it has a very dark color scheme, with lots of greys and metallic things, which could easily make it look a bit bland, but I actually think it works quite well here, as there's quite a lot of different block types and textures, but also makes things like the rotor and the floor stand out a bit better, which just makes the whole thing more visually appealing. Speaking of the rotor, it's made out of blue tube rotors, except for this one grey one up here, and I'm pretty sure it's the tallest rotor in the whole game. The console follows the theme of just being grey, with both stainless and normal steel. And just before I show you the bottom level, just look at how awful these stairs are. I mean, look at that, and this. I mean, why is it like that? Down here, there's access to the hallway system, which doesn't look that bad, to be fair. Well, no, actually, I'm really quite a big fan of this hallway by itself, but paired with the main interior, it just feels a bit random. It's so primitive looking, with all the wood and wood and wood. Although, to be fair, this floor is actually quite cool. I'm glad it continues in the main room as well. And down here, we have the bottom of the rotor, as I was saying, as well as those maintenance blocks, once again. And overall, it's just a really good looking interior, which is consistent and symmetrical, and that can't really be said for the next one. Yeah, consistent and symmetrical are not the words I'd use for this. The Memory TARDIS is from the Tales of the TARDIS spin-off, as well as the season 1 finale with Sutek and all that stuff. It's basically just a very small and cluttered room, but it also has one of my favourite hallway designs in this entire video, which I'll show in a second. But I do really like this control room. It has a really fun design that's executed really well. As for its accuracy, well, I'd start by saying the actual set is very, very detailed, as well as being really quite busy and dense. But because it's a decently small circle, and is made up of very small stuff from so many different TARDISes over the years, recreating that in Minecraft is just impossible pretty much. So what is here is very commendable. The most notable parts are the consoles, random iconography, weird episode references, and this campfire. Obviously, they're quite different, but to be fair, the size and shape is surprisingly accurate, and it's just the little details that are missing, which isn't a huge shock, as I said. It has quite a few of the TARDIS console panels, and they all have like working controls on them as well. And I mean, they've even got the one on the ceiling. Oh. It's got a white glass rotor, which I wouldn't dare to break because it's so cool. It has the maintenance blocks, as well as the panel interface for some reason, and even a roundel builder. But it does still have some of those little decorative items, like Auton Mickey's head, a beta Minecraft chest, and then random stuff like a bookshelf and a fence, because why not? And this is meant to be a campfire type thing, but in Tales of the TARDIS, it's not an actual campfire. It's just a very miniaturized version of the 13th Doctor's interior, which does somehow look quite a lot like a campfire, to be fair. But then over here in Dalek Mod, it's even more simplified, as it's just a crystalline block with a glass pane on it. But you know what? It works. It actually is oddly recognizable still. And it still has the 2 chairs, although this one's been moved slightly, which I assume is so you can actually get to the hallway. And this hallway is probably my favorite one out of the entire video. It's also probably the longest one, and just really cool. It goes through a bunch of different eras of the TARDIS, starting with this sort of very classic Who look, and then it goes to this sort of purple one. For some reason, I'm not really sure what that's meant to resemble, but it's cool. Then it passes into a coral section, then a Toyota-like section, the TV TARDIS, whatever this is, and whatever that is. Oh, and in case you're wondering, yes, all of these rotors move when you go into flight. It's a really weird thing to look at. I'm a bit of a sucker for the War Doctor's TARDIS, and that continues for Dalek Mod. He has a pretty simple control room and hallway design, but that's a big reason why it's so good. If you somehow don't know, this interior is basically a mix of the coral interior and the classic Who interior. The coral elements are implemented from these pillars, as well as the console, and then the classic Who stuff is all like the walls and the ceiling and floor and all that jazz. And although I've put the 2 different coral interiors above this one in my list, I think I prefer the design of the coral pillars in this interior. It's very like simplistic, and it just looks good, you know? The console is a block higher than the rest of the interior, which helps separate it and also gives a good sense of depth to everything, as well as these black carpets literally everywhere in the main room and even more randomly in the hallway. And I'm pretty sure these are meant to be like wires, which we're seeing going all across the edge here in the actual one. One area where this does feel a bit too empty and just a bit weird is the entrance door. I don't know, I think maybe it blends in too much. It's something about it just is a bit odd. I've put this interior in 13th place, and although it's called the Sidrat TARDIS, that name is a bit misleading. I don't know why they've called it that, because it just isn't the Sidrat interior at all. It's actually the Doctor's interior from the 80s. And just to make it more confusing, there is an actual Sidrat interior in the show, but not in the game. But then there actually is a Sidrat exterior in the game, which is the correct one, but has nothing to do with this interior at all, beside the name, which isn't even correct. So it's all a bit confusing. Basically, all we need to know is that although it's named the Sidrat interior, this is actually the Doctor's interior used from his TARDIS. It has a wide range of blocks and has quite a lot of depth and design to it, with all the quartz and diagonal walls and stuff like that. I really like this interior in the show, and it's been quite modified here, but that only really improves it. Although because the whole room revolves around a 2-block middle, thanks to the door entrance, the console is actually completely off center. I really like the white color scheme, but I think it only works because of the hint of colors from like the roundels and things. There's also quite a few animations going on and quite busy textures, which just helps to make it all feel a bit more lively. Even this like ceiling thing, I'm assuming it's the lamp, got a very symmetrical yet still quite complex design to it, and it all adds up. And over here there's decorative scanner, which was in the actual show, although it does look weirdly thin here. I don't know why they did it like that. The hallway continues the design of the console room pretty perfectly. It even adds in an extra roundel set, although the ceiling lights are completely off center. And this hallway was actually featured in the show, but it was quite a lot smaller and also didn't have those stone segments. But to be honest, I think I prefer this one quite a lot more. This is the Coral Mark II interior, not to be confused with the Coral interior, which will come up later on. I'll explain the differences between the two when I get to that one, but for now I'll just focus on this one. Obviously it's a recreation of the 9th and 10th Doctor's Coral TARDIS. I don't really know why it's called that, if I'm honest, that's just the name. But it's not that simple, because this interior was used from 2005 all the way to 2010, and even appeared again a few times after that, which means it had many different looks, mainly due to different lighting, as well as lots of different like colour changes. This one has gone for the look of Series 1, which you can tell from like the green lighting up here and on the console, as well as the Auton Mickey head. And speaking of the console, it's quite a lot larger than most of them, a similar size to the 60th one later on in the video, and it's even got a Kablam computer here. Wait, what the hell? There's weapons and a Wait, what? A ray gun? Oh god. I got a big car. Let me just fix this. Hang on. Okay, anyway, getting back to the task on hand, you can see the rotor has also got this sort of green look to it. But also ignoring all that, the interior as a whole is just really big, but a bit like too big, I guess. It just feels a bit empty, especially like around this part. Under the console here, it has that sort of maintenance area I keep going on about, but this one's quite a lot different to any other one I've seen so far. It has a very cramped look to it, with all like the steel grating and things, and also just barely any room to move around properly. The rotor continues all the way down like the block stack interior, and there's also these maintenance blocks, once again. And then under it all, there are these prismarine blocks, which as you probably know have quite a very slow animation to them, which adds a very subtle bit of like liveliness to this part of the interior. And then there's two hallways here, both leading to a dead end, and they follow the same theme as the main interior up there. Although the ceilings of these things are the exact same as the floor above, so over here there's just brick in the ceiling, which looks awful. And I don't even know why there's brick at the entrance. And speaking about the main ceiling here, I'm not a massive fan of it, mainly the purple stuff, which is apparently light grey. I hate terracotta so much. It doesn't really fit with the main interior at all and looks a bit out of place, even more so than the green cube things. And it's also just really flat compared to the walls. But moving on, we now have the This is based off the 3rd Doctor's TARDIS from season 10 with the 3 Doctors and Omega and all that jazz. It's called the classical colour interior, and I've placed this in 11th place, which is technically the top half of the list now, and I could see how you could be a bit surprised. I mean, it's quite simple, there's nothing really here, but there's a method to my madness. As you can probably tell by now, I'm quite a big fan of the simplicity of classical interiors, so obviously this is perfect for that, but also it has quite a good corridor design, a surprising range of colours and textures, and well, that's pretty much it, but that's kind of the point. Let me just explain it a bit better. The main console room here is just the console, the maintenance blocks, the scanner, this random accent wall. Most of the walls are just this white plastic ground wall, and then there's obviously the back wall I just mentioned, which looks weirdly accurate to the one used in the show. However, as you may have noticed, much like in the Sidrat interior, because of the 2-block entrance, the console and now the scanner as well are both off-center. I mean, the whole thing is pretty accurate, which isn't too surprising seeing how simplistic it is. Quite a simple color scheme, which is also reflected in the hallway, which shares the exact same color scheme and block format. The only thing that changes is the roof here, which is made out of the same stuff as the floor. One thing I don't like about this interior is the fact that these exit doors every now and then just look really out of place. Like they haven't even tried to sort of make it match the rest of the theme. But that's a really small detail, no one really cares about that. Apart from me. This is a replica of the First Doctor's interior, and it's actually really good. Making a recreation of the First Doctor's TARDIS is no easy task, not only because of the limitations of Minecraft and Dalek Mod, but also because of the limited view of the actual First Doctor TARDIS interior and the original set, but that's a really long story. Basically, all I'm saying is that this interior is weirdly accurate to the main set, while still having a fair share of custom stuff and all the basic Dalek Mod stuff. It has similar elements to the Sidrat interior, but it's just objectively better. I mean, look at it. The block palette is probably the most diverse out of any interior. It has the main console room and an extra little bit at the back, as well as a hallway system here, an extra room, and then another hallway. But this interior is as accurate as it could possibly be in Minecraft. The only things missing are like small bits of decoration and furniture and things, but you can't get that in Minecraft anyway, so there's no point. And it will just make it look a bit cluttered anyway. It can be debated on whether the color scheme is accurate or not, because technically the main set was actually green rather than white, but that's just so it could look more white on the monochrome TVs. So the white color was the intention, so I'd say this is more accurate. There's a few weird details details, like these two set of light boxes, this clay roundel wall, which is literally just wallpaper, a separated area at the back, as well as these two random indents, which I'm pretty sure are meant to have some of the furniture items, but as I said, they're not in the game, so it just looks a bit pointless. So all of that, plus the variety in colours and textures, while still being very accurate and consistent, just makes this such an amazing interior. And that's just the console room. To the right, there's an extra room here, much like in the actual one, although it has been changed slightly to that one. The actual set had more behind this bit, but none of that's in the game. But it is just a weird little room anyway. It's just more like a living quarters, I think. But it looks good in the game, so I'm not complaining. And then it does continue down here, but it very quickly leads to a dead end. Although the design does change quite a bit. And then over here is where the main hallway is, with quite a large design, but it has quite an annoyingly simple ceiling. Because if it weren't for that, it would probably be my favourite hallway design. I like the different types of walls. They've got the blank one, the roundel one, a door version, and then the stone one over here. And even the floor's quite varied. And then this area is even more different. It has light boxes, more variation on the floor, and even the clay roundels. But then it leads to another dead end, which is actually the other end of the other hallway. So I'm not sure why they didn't just link them up. This is the classic interior in 9th place, and it's the last classic Who interior in the video for quite a while. The naming system here continues to be a bit odd, as it calls this the classic Who interior pretty much, which is just weird and wrong. Although if any interior were to represent the whole of classic Who, for better or for worse, it would probably be this one, as I believe it was used for the most amount of time, all the way through the 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctors, so basically over a decade with one interior. It has a similar but slightly simplified block palette to the Sidrat interior, with the same roundels, quartz, and plastic, but there's also quite a few different things, like how the room is more like an oval shape now, and once again it has a console that isn't centered, although at least this time the scanners are centered because they've put 4 of them in. But going back to the console, it's made of stainless steel, which is a weird choice, but I think it works surprisingly well, and I think it's also the only console to feature a maintenance block as a part of the actual design, as well as having probably the most recognizable rotor in the whole of classic Who. Then there's a double door entrance to get into the hallway, which has quite an odd design. It has a slight claustrophobic feeling, with this very low ceiling and quite tight walls. And every now and then there's these door frames. There's no actual door in it, so you just stare into a big gap into the eternal terrifying void of our universe that one day will kill us all, and there's literally nothing we can do about it except accept it.
Anyway, moving on.
This is the other interior I mentioned when I was talking about the Coral Mark II interior, and as you can see they are quite different. It's quite a lot smaller than the other one, with a completely different block palette, and the execution of what is technically the same interior is just vastly different, because the walls, pillars, and even the area under the console are completely changed. Even the positioning and the look of the hallway is completely different as well. It's completely abandoned the green accent and leans a lot more into brighter colours like the blue and more pale colours. It's like everything has just been shrunk slightly, and it looks a lot more influenced by the TARDIS' later appearances, like in series 3 and 4, as it's a lot more blue and golden and generally more vibrant. It's hard to gauge whether either interior is more accurate, but generally the actual set was quite small, especially compared to the current one with Ncuti Gatwa, or Billy Piper, I guess. But basically, this is more accurate than the Mark II version, especially for those later series, but technically still for series 1. The coral pillars don't take up as much space, and they're a lot smoother as well in their texture, and even the roundels are a completely different block. The console and rotor use a cyan colour instead of the green and prismarine the other one used, which is a lot warmer and more welcoming. The under console area reinforces the idea of this interior being a lot more smaller and cramped, because even though the other one was also quite claustrophobic, this one feels less intentional and more just because of how small the interior is. It's just like a little hole under the console with all the maintenance blocks, and that's it. And then the last difference to note is the hallway system here, which for some reason just has the coral pillar completely blocking it, which I hate a lot. Maybe the design would look a bit better if it was like this, because it still works structurally and just doesn't block off the whole thing. I don't know. It directly continues the theme of the main room, even using these stupidly named terracotta blocks, and it goes on for quite a while as it turns the corner, goes down underneath the console room, then turns again and again and again. And once again it has the default door design, which I'm not a fan of, because it looks literally nothing like the rest of the interior, and it's, well, you know how I feel about that. It's just stupid. based off the 2013 interior used by Matt Smith's 11th Doctor, and probably most notably in the 50th anniversary special. As I'm sure you're aware, I'm a big fan of the 11th Doctor's era, so obviously I like this interior anyway, but the fact it's such a faithful recreation of the original, while still taking some creative liberties just to improve it, just makes this interior so good. And thanks to a random Google Maps Easter egg, we have a full 360-degree view of this interior, so it will be quite easy to compare it to the Dalek Mod version. As you can see, it's got all the essentials, the console's the correct shape and size, with a sort of metallic look to it with the steel. For some reason they went with the white tube rotor instead of a blue or cyan one. I don't know why they did this, but to be fair, it doesn't actually look that bad, and it kind of makes the whole place look more industrial, which is a good thing to be fair. And also leaves all the colour to the outer edges of the interior, which creates a good division between the main like scientific area and then the rest of the interior, which is just like there. There's also these two side panels, which I think would look better if there was controls on them, because they do otherwise look a bit just like random tables. I don't know. For quite a small interior, there's actually quite a lot here, but it still somehow feels a bit empty. Just to prove my point here, there's technically 3 floors in this place. The upper floor, the console floor, and under here. But an interior of this size and height could easily just be 1 floor. And speaking of that, this is an extra staircase. I don't know why they put it here. The actual set didn't have this, but they just decided to put it here. I don't know. As well as that, the walls here and the ceiling, to be fair, quite a lot darker than they should be, but it adds quite a lot of texture to it and still keeps the main essentials without the roundels and things here. So again, I think that's just like a positive addition. And on the lower level here, there's another roundel set, which are a lot more blue than they should be. Wait, what? Anyway, over here there's a hallway with a stainless steel door frame, which then turns into black stained steel, and then black to stainless steel, and then into plastic. I have no idea why. Then of course it leads to the main hallway, but I don't know why this slab is here. That's clearly wrong. I mean, you shouldn't be able to see the void. I don't know whether it's maybe meant to be like that, or just a full block, I'm not sure. This is probably one of the only interiors in the show that properly showed the hallway in detail, at least in New Who. And the hallway stuff is mainly from an episode called Journey to the Center of the TARDIS, and it did show a few designs for hallways, but you can easily tell which one this is meant to be because it's actually surprisingly accurate. The shape and size is all correct, even these like weird arch things, and it's even got these little like light strips here, which are such a cool design. I wouldn't even thought to do that. There's also then this little smaller section for some reason. I don't know why, but it looks kind of cool, so I'll take it. But yeah, overall just a really nice little interior, and I'm definitely not just saying that because I love it so much in the show. Definitely. I think it's been about 10 spots since we've had the last custom interior, and this one is called the Rebellious 15th Doctor's interior. It's kind of a very extreme, exaggerated Toyota-styled interior with a very dark and mainly red color scheme. It's a very detailed, yet somehow simplistic interior with a lot of personality, and it's just very visually interesting, which is why I've put it in spot 6. It has 3 floors, loads of little as well as quite big details, and the black and white color theme just looks so good. Although if I go into spectator mode real quick, you can see the remnants of the 15th Doctor's TARDIS around, which might suggest that it's more based off that one rather than the Toyota one, but they're all quite similar, so it doesn't really matter. Here on the main floor, there's quite a lot to go over. Probably the most striking thing is this floor design here. It has these multicolored groups of stained glass, where you can also see into the bottom level. It's quite a ballsy move to have a floor like this, because it could have easily looked way too busy, especially with the see-through aspect. I think it has quite a nice chaotic element, and it works quite well. And I think chaotic is a good word to describe this interior, because it's not like it's out of control. It's very clear they wanted to do it like this, and many other elements continue that idea, like these weird twisty pillar things, and even the rotor and the ceiling, but also a whole bunch of other stuff I'll show later on. This rotor is probably the most unique one in the entire mod. It starts all the way down here with this red tube rotor, then it goes up through the floor, then switches to 2 mirroring red glass rotors, then switches back to red tube, goes through this like chamber thing, then the chamber gets bigger and it's covered with black stained glass, and then it goes all the way to the ceiling. So actually now I'm thinking of it, the one I said earlier that was the tallest rotor is definitely not. This is definitely bigger than that. In case you're wondering how these two look in flight, it looks like this. Much like the Toyota TARDIS, this has 2 side panels here, and these ones actually have controls on them, so they have functionality, as well as 2 decorative scanners on the walls over here. At least I'm assuming that's what they're meant to be. Now on each side, there's entrances to a hallway, but it's not really a hallway, it's more like a lift, because there's a ladder here, which goes all the way from the bottom to the very top. So I'll go to the top layer first. As I said, it's basically just an exaggerated version of the Toyota interior, which is further emphasized with this floor, as it's basically just a balcony looking over the console area, and apart from that, it's pretty pointless. The color scheme is pretty much completely changed. There's there's a steel floor, but then a mushroom wall for some reason, and then a calcite ceiling, as well as having random chairs dotted around the place, with this one having an Easter egg on it. And going down to the bottom layer, you can see it's even more different than that. In fact, it's probably the weirdest thing out of this whole interior. It's basically just like an old abandoned basement of the interior, with a complete change of block palette, as it's now mainly wooden, although it does have the same pillars from the console area, and two of them also have this light turned off, which I guess to signify age or something, as well as having 3 hallways this time, the bottom of the rotor, and a whole bunch of decorative items. The bottom rotor section is basically just a smaller version of the bit at the top at the ceiling, as it sort of expands out a little bit. Obviously it has the maintenance blocks as well, but also a scanner for some reason. But there's also this clump of like chests and barrels and storage vaults. Oh, I'm in a cobweb. There's also this like small library area with yet another Easter egg in this lectern book, as well as the cobwebs dotted around the place, of course. I actually really like the contrast between this layer and the rest of the interior. It's not too jarring because they're separated, and you can't even really notice it from up here anyway. And it just creates a good sense of age in the interior and adds some more character, which is always a good touch. It still has these 2 hallways with the ladders, obviously, but also this one over here too. And this is more like a normal hallway. It forks into 2 directions, which then fork into 2 more directions, which then go to a dead end. And this is the exact same on the second side. This is based off the 11th Doctor's first interior, and obviously I'm somewhat biased I guess, but I do genuinely really love this interior design, both in the show and in Dalek Mod. It's quite large, at least for a non-custom interior, and it's full of colour. It is slightly limited by Minecraft, as this interior is quite detailed and things, and representing most of this interior in a blocky format just isn't possible. But if you bear that in mind, it's still somehow quite accurate. I mean, the fact it's so recognisable instantly just proves that. The control room has an orangey yellow type theme, and once again has 3 floors. The entrance is on the bottom floor, which also loops around to go underneath the console. Then the console itself is on its own little floor, and then going up here there's a small little balcony on its own floor. For some reason the entrance door has like a birch slab over it for some reason, which might be trying to resemble that projection light thing above the door in the actual set, I don't know, but it does look a bit out of place here. And of course there's this massive scanner thing, which is made out of glass. But the console and rotor here is where it starts to get a bit interesting. Although quickly you can see the floor design has changed obviously, but it has quite a nice symmetrical pattern to it, and still very closely resembles the original. But they've had to take a lot of creative liberties when it comes to the console here. The real console design was quite detailed with many intricate little controls and different materials. And there's even a lot of light baked into it, which obviously can't be recreated here. So it's basically just an extremely simplified version of that console. It takes some aspects of it, like the green lighting and orange controls and a few other things, and compiles those into the console using stained steel and a random acacia button, while kind of neglecting the yellow theme of it, which might be just to make it stand out a bit better against the rest of the interior, as that is all quite yellow. And then the rotor here, at least on this floor, is just normal vanilla glass. That's because there's no rotor in the game that's really similar to the actual one used in the set, although it would be quite cool because it would be like 2 or 3 blocks tall, but because of that it's literally just glass, as well as having screw strap doors on the side. Then on the side here there's a hanging scanner, much like in the actual one, although it does look slightly out of place, and I think maybe the spruce one would look a bit better. I mean, yeah, look at that fits perfectly. Then this area forks off into 3 different directions, all of which taking you to different places. So there's actually 3 hallways, one there, and one down here, and I'm assuming the design is based off the one from the Doctor's wife, although it has been slightly modified to fit Minecraft better, because the shape is quite a lot different, especially with these arches making it a lot more rectangular. And it's just quite a nice touch to make the interior feel quite a lot bigger without having to actually expand it very much, although I do wish they linked up to each other a bit, because I do feel a bit too separate. But putting that to one side, here's the top floor, and there's nothing crazy, it's literally just one pathway. It's very similar to the other sort of balconies in most other interiors, as it overlooks the main room, and that's literally it, there's nothing else up here. Then to finish off, under the console here, which is once again probably shown the most in the Doctor's wife, they did pop up a few other times, and it's a bit of a weird design with like random holes in the floor, but it is accurate. I'm just not a fan of the original, although I do think it would have been quite funny if there was no blocks here and it just went straight to the void. The bottom side of the rotor here is made out of the tube rotors rather than just glass, which again isn't totally accurate, but it is more accurate down here than it is up there. Oh, and before I move to the next TARDIS, I just want to quickly mention this ceiling design. It's actually quite a cool look, and I like the 3 rings going around the rotor, but it just looks really out of place in this interior. But that's not to say it's not accurate, because it is quite accurate to the original, but there's a reason it was never actually on screen in the show, because it just looks awful. So that's more of a critique of the actual set than the Dalek Mod version. And the random fun fact I just thought of, the reason they blew up the tortured hub in Children of Earth is because that set was actually getting taken down to build this interior in it. So maybe the ceiling is a side effect of that. This is called the pagoda interior. From a few Google searches and a bit of TARDIS wikiing, I'm pretty certain this is a custom-made interior for a thing called a jade pagoda, which I think is some sort of TARDIS escape pod mentioned in some novel or something. Anyway, that's not really too important for this interior. All you need to know is that this is custom and just named after that to give it a name, I think. I think it's safe to assume it's very loosely based around the Roof Doctor interior, mainly because of the blue accent color, as well as the sort of classic Who feeling. But even with that, this is so different than any other interior. Unlike the final 3 interiors, there's not actually too much to go over here, so I suppose I'll go over the console area quickly, and then make my way around everything else. So yeah, it has clear roots of classic Who interiors, especially the Roof Doctors, and so in turn the First Doctors, which you can really see from the console shape and size, as well as the rotor and this weird lamp on top. It uses cyan plastic as the accent color, which should look really out of place, but it somehow works really well, especially in conjunction with the console, I guess. But it's also a more subtle roundel type here. The grey square roundels, kind of hard to notice, and they're not even round, so I don't even know why they're called that. But these ones are used more up there anyway. In fact, the vast majority of this interior, other than the console and these accent colors, are just very monotone greys and blacks, which is normally quite a bad thing, but in this case, it really makes the console stand out more, which is kind of what you want when you first walk into quite a grey interior. Although I must say, once again, the stairs going up to the second floor are just awful. They aren't as bad as the other ones, but they're still not great. Anyway, this floor is pretty much the same as any other interior. It's a ring around balcony-like floor, which overlooks the rest of everything else. Although it probably has my favorite railing design. It uses iron bars for structural support, and then grey carpet on top. Normally, I'm not a big fan of iron bars because they can look out of place. Same with fences really, but they're more janky because they're kind of like a block in a bit as well. But there's a really good balance here. The carpet gives it a lot more depth, and the iron bars are only used sparingly. The walls are grey, and black, but really grey. As I said, it has these roundels every now and then, which gives it a nice bit of texture, as well as these ship lights. But then over here, there's an entrance to a hallway, and well, just to be honest, I really don't like this hallway, like at all. This entrance bit is okay. It continues the use of those roundels and the ship lights, and even has some nice interesting floor design as it changes a bit, as well as of course having these random doors. But then once you turn the corner, they just give up. I mean, look at this bit. It's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it is just a hallway, and you only see it if you're looking for it, but it would be nice to have a good one. But it doesn't really bother me too much, and I still love the interior enough to give it 4th place. But moving on to the top 3, in 3rd place we have like basically every TARDIS at this point, it's laid out in a similar way to the Toyota one, with its main console floor, but this time instead of one on top, it has an extra one down here, but it's still 3 technically. The very start of the entrance has this weird cramped hallway to get into the main interior, and it's a very, very unique feature that I'm not sure I like. In concept, it's a great idea, and it looks good here, but it just feels a bit unnecessary. I don't know. But this is where it starts to get interesting. It's primarily white, with a lot of blue, but also a mix of grey, black, and brown thrown in there, and it all fits together to create this very chaotic and modern look. It's kind of hard to explain it. Okay, so the console itself was very classic Who, with the layout, color, and rotor. Also, quite a lot of this resembles the 15th Rebellious Doctor's interior, like these side panels and the scanners. But in general, the design here, especially this floor, is just chaos. There's a bunch of like trapdoors and buttons and rusted steel for some reason, as well as redstone dust and a random arch from fuel tank. And it's all just sort of thrown all over the place, and it should not look as good as it does because it looks so cool. There's also these steel pillars reminiscent of the 8th Doctor's interior, which may or may not be coming up in a second, although these 2 interiors just don't connect to it for some reason. The actual ceiling has a very subtle dome shape to it, once again made out of scorched quartz. There's also a weird redstone theme throughout the whole interior, with the things I mentioned before like the trapdoors and buttons and redstone, but also these random levers, especially over here on this wall. I mean, there's even tripwire hooks for some reason. And then going downwards, you can see, well, first of all, there's a functioning staircase, which is always nice, but also the block palette is kind of shifted down here. There's a lot more cyan terracotta, as well as calcite. There's not really too much to this level. There's 2 doors to the void, as well as 2 hallway entrances, and also a fake hallway entrance. The hallway itself was pretty cool, to be fair. It follows the same block palette and throws in these steel arches, and those random exit doors that are for some reason in every interior actually look good here, because the creator actually took the time to like make a pattern around it and make it fit in. And down here's the last part of this interior, and also the most unique thing. It sort of looks like the maintenance area was meant to be up here, then it just fell through the floor into this sort of void-like area with the black concrete. I have no idea what it's really trying to do, but you know what, I don't care, it just looks cool, so I'm gonna take it. I believe this was the latest interior added to the game, and it's of course the 14th and 15th Doctor's TARDIS. I guess technically just the 14th Doctor's because of the lack of a jukebox, but shut up. In the grand scheme of things, there isn't really that much to talk about this interior, but at the same time there are, just because of how big it is. This very nearly got first place, and I definitely didn't just move it down because the season 2 finale was so bad, because that would be wrong of me to do. But no, seriously, this interior is probably one of my favourite ones in the show. It's sort of a mix between classic Who with the white colour scheme and roundels, as well as new Who with a sort of rotor design and the size of the place. For the last time in this video, this is similar to Toyota TARDIS, as this console is on its own sort of area, and there's a floor below it. Oh, but this interior takes that aspect and ramps it up. Get it? It ramps it up because there's ramps. But yeah, the use of all these little ramps and platforms creates a good sense of height and depth, while also just actually being quite big and depthy. Depthy? Is that a word? Depthy? Well, this side over here is pretty much empty, which isn't a Dalek mod thing, it's a thing with the actual set, because there isn't actually a wall here, it's just a big gap for like cameras and things. The floor is sort of gridded in the same way the actual set is, but that's boring. The console's where it starts to get fun. It's one of the bigger consoles, having around 15 more blocks to play with rather than the normal 3x3. It's mainly made of quartz, much like the ceiling and walls. Unfortunately, it doesn't just spam controls everywhere because that'll look chaotic and stupid, because it does still try to stay at least somewhat accurate. Obviously that's going to be hard, but they even left a space here for the coffee machine, which I mean would be such a cool feature if they added that. I mean, it would fit right here, and it's so stupid it might just work. The actual TARDIS has probably my favourite rotor ever, and it's just so different from anything else in the show. However, that rotor design isn't available in Dalek Mod, so instead it just has a cyan rotor, a blue rotor, and another cyan rotor, which still shows some variation, but it's very subtle. And then this area diverts into two directions, and these ramps go all over the place. Some of them lead to like fake hallways, and then others just go down to the bottom floor. Although I do want to quickly mention the design of these walls because they're so cool. It's a nightmare for anyone without a phobia of holes or whatever. So it has 4 connecting quartz stairs, and behind that there's 4 connecting ship lights, which in total creates 1 roundel, and that alone allows for more depth and things. But not only is it used there, it's used across the whole interior, across diagonal walls, up here near the ceiling, and down here on the floor. Although it can't be used on the main ceiling because all the stairs just connect with each other. But going back to the bottom here, this path goes around the whole edge of the interior, and then on the bottom here they use an actual roundel rather than this roundel design, and it goes up to the middle, and of course there's the maintenance block. And over here, when I was coming down the stairs, you may have noticed this random trapdoor, but it actually leads to underneath this area, into a whole new custom bit of the TARDIS. I made it sound a bit more exciting than it is. Basically, it's just a hallway. But as I mentioned, upstairs there's only fake hallway entrances, because no hallway was ever shown on screen, so this is all completely custom. It has the same roundel designs and follows the same quartz theme. It also has these little door entrance things, which are reminiscent of the ones in the main console room. And then around here, it loops all the way, but the theme changes here. Basically, it's just a long version of this design, all the way through, and it cuts to the start again. Although it feels so disconnected, it's just kind of a bit pointless. And I feel like it would have benefited from being up here, even if it wouldn't be as accurate, because having just a random ladder down there just looks way out of place. Oh, and by the way, this thing up here is meant to be a scanner. So yeah, overall, that's a really good interior and such a good and faithful recreation of the original. But there's only one interior that tops that for me, and I've mentioned it a few times already in the video, and that's of course the If you can't tell, this is based off the 8th Doctor's TARDIS from the 1996 TV movie. It's quite a simple interior, especially compared to the other ones this end of the list, but that's really part of its charm. The TARDIS is where the Doctor lives all his life. It's more like his home than Gallifrey ever was, and this interior is the most homely out of any interior ever. But along with that, it still has the necessary scientific TARDIS-y stuff, and has a really good balance between humidity and practicality. Man, that ceiling is cool. Wait, no, actually, I'll start with the entrance. The doors are made out of prismarine, which is an odd choice. It's not necessarily inaccurate, at least the texture of it isn't. That's pretty much spot on, but the color of it is really weird. It doesn't really fit it at all. And then there are these 2 random statues next to the door, which are there in the actual set, and if I'm honest, I actually prefer the Dalek versions, because having 2 randomly posing women just holding a torch is a bit odd. But focusing on the main interior here, it's very different to anything else. It has a stone floor and a variety of wall blocks, mainly green and grey and brown, and this, which, contrary to popular belief, is definitely brown. Why are things named so badly? Am I colorblind or something? The one from the movie has probably some of the weirdest controls on any console, but obviously you can't get that in Dalek Mod, so instead it uses the normal controls and then a random polished blackstone button. Once again, the rotor is quite different than anything else in the actual version, so instead in Minecraft they just use the blue tube rotor, which is similar enough, doesn't really matter. And then the console is in its own little area, is raised up by a block and has these arches surrounding it, and then hanging off the arches there's a scanner here, which once again would probably be improved by being spruce, not necessarily because it would fit in the main interior a bit better, just because it'd be more accurate. Just next to the console here there's a chair, a lamp, a side table, and a rug. I think that's what that is. That's a rug. Yeah, that's a rug, yeah. The proportions are a bit off here, which I suppose is to be expected, but the difference between the main raised console with blue lighting, contrasting the warm lighting of this cozy little area next to the bookshelves, works really well in the actual interior, and the idea is still here in Minecraft, but isn't necessarily executed very well. But once again, that's just a Minecraft issue, not really anything to do with the mod. Oh, and speaking of that, the bookshelf here is a big part of that homely look I was on about, and it sort of links to this back area over here, which I'll get to in a second. But there's also a ladder, which takes you up to this second floor, if you can really call it that. Without this little area, it would all be on one floor, and it would look a bit flat. So this area just has a bit more visual intrigue, and is an actual balcony. I know I keep saying that in the video, but this is literally a balcony. There's also a very short hallway over here, which just ends, and follows the sort of theme of that corner over there. And there's also another hallway over here, which follows the exact same sort of theme. It is slightly longer, but same difference. And because there's no little area under the console or anything, the maintenance blocks are put in their own little area over here, which sort of follows that cozy theme from back here, which is a bit odd because the maintenance blocks are normally in a very scientific environment, but it somehow works quite well. Speaking of this area, it's sort of like an entertainment sort of area, I guess. The floor is still stone, which I'm not a big fan of, and then there's a bunch of plants and stuff around. This is actually quite cool. This is meant to be a piano, which you can probably already tell because it's actually really well made. It's literally 6 blocks, yet it somehow looks exactly like a piano. There's also this big ominous wall of just trapdoors that's just filled to the rim with chests, and I definitely didn't check every single one of those chests individually just to make sure there's no Easter egg. I don't know what you're on about. But probably, well no, actually, definitely, my favorite part of this interior is the ceiling design here. It's basically just a better version of the Rebellious 16th Doctor ceiling. There's a bunch of layers of black glass with end rods in between them all, and then it slowly fades out into the distance. This was shown in the movie and looks so good, and it somehow looks just as good in Minecraft. Obviously, if you can't tell, these end rods are meant to be stars, and this is one massive screen. Oh, and one more thing, before you click here to see me exploring all of Dalek Mod, not just the TARDISes, in survival mode, just to see if the mod still holds up in 2025.